Good morning, Evan Minard here, and
Tristan Pack.
yes, and we're back for our book club, reading out of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. We are on the second section, which is books 5 through 8, and yeah, without further ado, let's continue. Book 5, what did you get from that book 5?
Well, honestly, the very first one is like one that I always think about. It's like at dawn when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? I hate getting up in the morning. I was almost late here because I was like so tired I didn't want to get up. But like anytime I hit the snooze button more than twice, I always like think about this quote because like, what do I have to do? Like, there's literally nothing in bed for me except for like me regretting staying in bed. And even if I'm like feeling like down that day or something like that, I usually just think about like, it is my job to exist outside of the bed. So like that's what helps me get out of bed in the morning and start making my coffee and stuff like that. So as a guy who hates waking up, this definitely has gotten me up like very early in the morning and think. Definitely when I wake up for the 6 a.m., do I have to think about this quote? Like you have to. Like you can't just wake up at 5 a.m. being happy and jovial. It's tough.
Yeah.
So that's like the first one. That's like the best one I think in the whole chapter.
Absolutely. I'll read a couple that I highlighted. The gist of book 5 that I got was accept life as it is and give kindness because it is correct to do so. And that's the human thing to do. And one of the highlights that I had is a third sort is in a way not even conscious of his action, but is like the vine which has produced grapes and looks for nothing else once it is born of its own fruit. And for me, it's like going back to being who you are. He does a lot of in here quotes of like humans do things and they go out and are acting with their conscious mind to do human things. If you want to be an animal or lazy, you can just stay in bed and just only worry about sleeping and eating. And there's what else we have? The universal nature was a big one in chapter 5 too, where he talks about, so there are 2 reasons why you should be content with your experience. One is that it has happened to you, was prescribed for you, and is related to you, a thread of destiny spun for you from the first by the most ancient causes. The second is that what comes to each individual is determining a part of the welfare, the perfection, and indeed the very coherence of that which governs the whole. And that, I felt like that was a big theme throughout the book 5.
Yep. I like this one right here. For me, it's number 11, but what am I doing with my soul? It says interrogate yourself. I do that all the time. I feel like ever since reading this book, I feel like my whole stream of consciousness changed. Like I started like talking to myself, but like with like a logic versus like emotion type deal. And I feel like that's something that he does basically throughout the entire book is like remind himself of his moral code and his ethos so he can stay on the right path. Because he probably had so many outside interferences that would like make him stray from the path that he had. So I feel like interrogating yourself is like something that I do every day. Like, was that thing I just did in line with what I want to do with myself? And if it wasn't, then I need to reflect on that and learn from it. If it is, then I'm fine. And it also prevents like cognitive dissonance where I'm like have 2 opposing beliefs. I can just kind of sort it out in my head. And that's what I use my journal for, just to interrogate myself and just like make sure everything is how it should be. Kind of like how you clean your house, you got to clean your mind up.
Oh yeah.
And I have my journal's literally called Meditations. I wrote meditations inside of it. So,
Nice.
yeah, because I'm such a fiend for the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I got one right after 11. It's number 12 here, and it says, if you think of the true goods there are, wisdom, for example, self-control, justice, courage, with these in your mind, you could not give any credence to the popular saying of too many goods to make room, because it will not apply. So all those are his virtues that he talks about, and making sure that you're living to that standard. Section 16, I wrote down community. It follows that the good of a rational creature is community. It has long been shown that we are born for community, or was it not clear that inferior creatures are made in the interest of the superior, and the superior in the interest of each other? What else you got?
I got number 18 here. Nothing happens to anyone that he can't endure. The same thing happens to other people, and they weather it unharmed out of sheer obliviousness or because they want to display character. Is wisdom really so much weaker than ignorance and vanity? I like this one because it reminds you that you're not the only one who has hard times. Like, I feel like a lot of people kind of get caught in their own little bubble, you know, and like I feel like a lot of the people I admire in my life do this, like where they just kind of not suffer quietly, but they're strong when they're suffering, and I feel like it helps a lot knowing that like even back like 2,000 years ago, this guy was struggling with stuff, and he had everything in the world, so it's like he could have no struggle if he wanted to, but instead he writes about it in the book.
Yeah, we almost, because of our culture nowadays, like that's why cold punches and saunas and like artificially creating struggle. Jiu-jitsu is a great reason for struggle, because people are so plush and comfortable.
They got to simulate
their
struggle
Netflix,
now,
their couches, their AC heater. So now, so we're not life and death. It's like creating.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson was like, and only in the past 100 years have we went from our two objectives in life is to procreate and survive, and now it's so easy to survive and so easy to procreate that like you have nothing that you have to want to do, and that's like why a lot of people struggle nowadays. So we have to like simulate struggles by like simulating combat with each other. You know? It's like, it's funny.
I have number 19 is I wrote about the soul. Things of themselves cannot touch the soul at all. They have no entry to the soul and cannot turn or move it. The soul alone turns and moves itself, making all externals presented to it cohere with judgments it thinks worthy of itself. Basically being a sovereign being and having control over your thoughts, and that the outside doesn't influence you. You have control over it.
I didn't realize that until I read this book, that like you were able to do that. Like no one like told me growing up that you can like change how you think about things, and that changes how they actually are. And I think that's a powerful thing that I try to teach all my kids. Like there's literally no reason to be upset at a lot of things, just if you think about it. If you just actually think about it, you'll be fine. One of that actually kind of goes into mine, number 26. Don't let the mind start in with judgments, calling it good or bad. Like to me, that's like you kind of feed your whatever happened into like a processor in your mind to determine whether or not it was good or bad. Like I remember when I hurt my shoulder, I wasn't even in November. I wasn't even upset about it, because in my head I immediately was like, is this good for me or is it bad for me? I was like, well, it's bad that I can't train as much, but it's good now that I have a crutch that I can use in training. And like I was not even upset about it afterwards, except for the fact that I couldn't like take my jacket off, because it was really hard to move my arm. But I feel like if you can determine whether anything's good or bad, and another thing really is good or bad, it's what you make of it. That really, I feel like that helped me out so much growing up when I first learned about it.
Well, that's the truth of it. The reality of it is that it's the story we tell about something that either creates good or bad.
Yep.
And if you just face what happened with objectivity, you're going to know that you can turn that into whatever you want, have the power to do that.
Yeah.
That's a really, really empowering
That's
place.
probably like a superpower, honestly. Like, people who realize that, I feel like, are the most successful people. Like the ones who, like, if something happens to them, they like are not unfazed by it, but they know how to react to it the right way, versus the people who, like, something happens to them and they just take it like, not like a victim mentality, but they just like let it happen to them, versus like choosing how to let it happen to you.
One of my declarations in my statement, my document, is everything happens for me, not to me.
Yep.
And so like if you just really distill that idea, that concept, it just takes away victimhood.
Yep.
It's like things are happening as they should, and I'm going to get some lessons or some gold out of it.
Yeah, why would I not be somewhat happy for this happening? Even if things like awful like happen to me now, I always like somehow immediately see the good in it, because like there always is a good in it. If there's anything that happens, can have a good or bad. So winning a tournament can be good, but it can also be bad for you too. Losing a tournament can be good, or it can be bad for you too. It's all up to how you interpret it. So,
well, let's move on to book 6. Unless you have anything else to add on that.
I think that's everything.
I put my little notes about book 6 was how to react to others' negative behavior, but to use philosophy for his own behavior. Change is inevitable. It's part of the whole, and our own nature is universal nature. Those are kind of like some of the take-homes I got from that.
Yeah, I like the kind of what going off nature. Number 3 for me says, don't let the true nature or value of anything elude you. I feel like that to me, that talks about like looking out into the world and seeing everything for as it actually is, and like appreciating it, and then also looking inward to see if your behavior has something behind it that like can reflect into the outside world. So I think like from an external perspective, you're looking at like the world and really appreciating it. I like this book because it talks so much about nature, and like how like that, I feel like that's like his focal point, is like anything revolving around nature and like human nature is like the best thing that you can do for yourself. And so not letting the true nature or value of anything elude you, I feel like is a good thing. Basically, it's gratitude, honestly.
Absolutely.
So.
I have 19 highlighted. Do not imagine that if something is hard for you to achieve, it is therefore impossible for any man, but rather consider anything that is humanly possible and appropriate to he within you, your own reach to. Mm-hmm. So you can, essentially, if it's possible, you can reach it as well. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the 4 minute mile idea.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these examples of people doing extraordinary stuff, and like all of those things are within us as well. We have the capability to do those.
Yeah, I got 2 here. Number 6 is the one I always like tell students who are like arguing with another student or like arguing with a sibling, and it's number 6 says the best revenge is to not be like that. So like if someone's like, this kid did this and he's not listening, I'll be like, the best thing you can do is just not be like that. And like it's pretty simple, and I feel like people would just genuinely understand, like, oh, I'm just not gonna act that way, you know. And then 29, I like this. It's the definition for disgraceful: for the soul to give up when the body is still going strong. I feel like that's a.
I like that.
Yeah, I like it because it's like your body can continue moving, but you just decided to stop. You know, to me, that's like if I'm doing a class and like Joe says it's time to roll, and I'm like, I don't feel like rolling. Like my body probably feels decent enough to roll, but like my mind isn't all there. What also sucks is when your body is done, but your soul wants to keep going. It's like the dissonance there. But I definitely feel like that, the disgraceful. Like, you know, whenever you have more to give, and if you choose not to give it, like, I don't know about you, but like if I know that I could have like done a workout or something, and I just chose not to do it because I was like tired or something, I feel so awful for like the rest of the day. So it's like I kind of have to, you know. It's like when people were. Like, if my friends want to hang out late at night, I'm like, sorry, I have to wake up early to train. They're like, oh, you train all the time. You can just skip one. And I look at them, I'm like, I literally can't. Like, if I skip one training session.
I'll pay for it.
Yeah, I'll pay for it upstairs. Like, it's not like that I need a rest or anything, you know. So.
I have 38 highlighted. You should meditate often on the connection of all things in the universe and their relationship to each other. In a way, all things are interwoven and therefore have a family feeling for each other. One thing follows another in due order through the tension of movement, the common spirit inspiring them, and the unity of all being. I just think that goes back to nature and the connectedness of everything.
Also, like, thinking that everything has a purpose. That's why I feel like, yeah, I feel like if you just think that nothing has like a meaning behind it, then that's how it's pretty easy to get in that victim mentality, you know. My next one's the one afterwards, 39. The things ordained for you, teach yourself to be at one with those, and the people who share them with you, treat them with love, real love. That's something I try to do all the time. Like real love to me is like showing someone that you care about them and that you're actually listening to them. Because I feel like a lot of people don't actually listen. Then a lot of people do, and the people who do listen are like usually the ones you get really close with. And also the things ordained for you. He doesn't say if they're good or bad things, so because he doesn't attribute a meaning to them. So even that anything that happens to you, teach yourself to be at one with those. And that's like something that's been hard for me to do, and I've been recently getting better at it. It's like no matter what happens, like I need to be at one with it and like be okay with it, like any flaw that I have or anything like that.
This is what my 39 says: fit yourself for the matters which have fallen to your lot, and love these people among whom destiny has cast you, but your love must be genuine. So it's just
like
a different interpretation, but they're slightly different words. But
yeah, I like that.
Cool. Where you at?
I'm at 53.
I got that one too.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Mine says, practice really hearing what people say. Do your best to get inside their minds. And I do that all the time, especially when I have maybe a parent who's upset at me. Like, especially when someone's upset. Like, if you can just like I don't know, like go in like third person mode and just hear what they're saying, and then just think about like the situation they're in. Why are they saying this to me, and what would cause them to say this? It's so easy to handle people. Like one of my old instructors used to say, like, everyone just wants you to be a therapist for like 10 minutes, and then they'll actually want to hear what you have to say. Yeah. It's like if you can just sit there and really hear what people are saying from like an anger standpoint, from like a sadness standpoint, from a happiness standpoint, I feel like it's really easy to start to be a good person and like understand why people act the way they do. And it also helps with yourself. Like for me, it's like if I can understand why someone's doing this, I should be able to understand why I'm doing something too. So it's good for all those reasons. People want to be heard. They want to be validated and part of their story. Even if you are
coming from a position of thinking that it's not about that. There's actually a really good video. It's super funny. It's called "It's Not About the Nail," and I'll share it with you after this. But it's a really funny take on the difference between men and women, and how women will say something oftentimes, and I've experienced with my wife, and she's not looking for a solution. She wants to be heard.
That's so hard.
She wants to be heard and be validated. And so, like, recognizing that there are times and places where you just are there with them in that. Because, my 53 says this: accustom yourself not to be disregarding of what someone else has to say. As far as possible, enter into the mind of the speaker. So when I enter into the mind of my wife, it's like she wants to just know that I care, and she doesn't really want a solution necessarily.
I think it's funny because I feel like every guy knows that. Like, every guy is very solution oriented. Like, how can I fix this right now? I don't know what it is about the mind that does that, but like, because it's hard, because like you don't really accept that like there is no solution. Just like, I just want to be heard, and it's like, well, no, I need a solution. Like, but it's what they need in that moment. I think that's funny. That, like, it's not like you just want to, all you have to do is listen. And that should be easier than finding a solution. Yeah. But it's harder as a guy to do that, I feel like.
And then the last one I have is 58. No one will prevent you from living in accordance with the principle of your own nature. Nothing will happen to you contrary to the principle of universal nature. So,
retaining sovereignty.
Yes.
I like that. Let's see. I think about this often. Number 6.
This is book 7?
Yes.
Book 7, yep.
So number 6 for me is so many who remembered already forgotten, and those who remembered them long gone. So this to me is like, it helps me understand that like my life is just like really finite, and that like nothing really matters, but in the best way possible. So like if I'm worried about, if everything goes wrong, like, oh man, like I lost my job, I'm homeless, like everything's like awful, I can get in like a cycle that thinking like this matters, But like if you think about it in a way like I'll be gone in 60 years, maybe this is the best thing that could happen to me. Now I can maybe enjoy my time. I can sit and think with myself. And then I live a fulfilled life. Jordan Peterson had a quote, and he said, "A good life exhausts itself." So it's like by the end of your days, you should be like so exhausted because of how much you did that like you feel fulfilled. And so many who remembered already forgotten, and those who remembered them long gone. I feel like it also just puts into perspective that nothing like is that big of a deal. Like,
yeah, that's the gist of what book 7 I wrote. Change, don't fear death. It's life is short. That was a lot through this book. I felt like, and
I feel like it's something everyone's afraid of.
Yeah.
Like I remember at my old job, I would teach, and I had an assistant. He was 16, and I was talking to students about like their biggest fear, and then I asked him, I was like, "What's your biggest fear?" He was like, "Oh, it's definitely death." And I was so interested because I was like, "Really?" And he was like, "I think about it all the time, and it scares me." And I was like, "That's like the main motivator I have in my life. Like that, I'm not afraid of it at all. Like I feel like that's what gives everything meaning. Like that's why like life itself has meaning. So to me, I feel like this book changed the way I think about death, because I started reading this after my brother passed away, and that was like a huge not culture shock, but like cognitive shift, I should say. And ever since then, like I feel like I look at death in a way that's like, hey, that's like it's like a deadline. Like I got to complete everything by a deadline.
And things shifted for me around death when I like it's an inevitability, and so like and you can't have birth without death. So all endings are the other beginnings. Yeah, and so the in between is the magic, right? That's the beauty of life, is that we're in the between of birth and death. Yep. And so embracing
the two things we don't have control over.
Yes,
we have
embracing that gift. And so this kind of ties into, I have number 3 part of that underlined, where it was, but bear in mind that a person's worth is measured by the worth of what he values. And so they determine what their own worth is. If they say that they create it. So if I feel like being good at jiu-jitsu is a value of mine, then the worth of that is going to be contributing to who I am.
Yep. And people who care about money, that contributes to them. The people who care about their family, that contributes to them. You can tell always, like just looking, even just knowing someone for about 5 minutes, you can tell what they find meaningful, and that changes.
That determines their value. Yep. That determines their own personal value of how they're showing up.
If you care about partying, you're going to see it in their behavior. I think it's really interesting that like the one thing that you value determines like how you act in the world completely.
What you got next?
I have one, number 27. I just wrote fantastic quote. And it says, treat what you don't have as non-existent. Look at what you have, the things you value most, and think of how much you'd crave them if you didn't have them. But be careful. Don't feel such satisfaction that you start to overvalue them. It would upset you to lose them. I feel like that's just, moderation right there. I feel like
I have that exact one underlined, and it's just gratitude I wrote next to it.
Because I think about this all the time. Like, if I'm, again, waking up in the morning, I'm like, I really don't want to go to training. I think about, 2 years ago, you wanted to train full-time, but you couldn't because of work. And I think before that, I'm like, even before that, you wanted to be able to kick ass as a kid, but you never were able to. And you wanted to be like a superhero, but you couldn't. And even before that, you wanted to be a writer. And it's like, if I look back, I feel like, everything that I want, I have right now. And it's honestly I don't want anything else right now. I feel like I'm good the way I am, but also not getting so attached to that you overvalue it. Because then what if everything just goes to shit? Then I'm really screwed. So I feel like appreciating what you have, but then appreciating it when it's gone too, but being able to appreciate when it's gone, whatever replaced it, you have there.
Well, what can't be gone is your intrinsic value that you've created of knowing you're a person who can do that. Mm-hmm. So because you've built this life and you've created this life, and like you said, you don't really want to change much because it's going really well.
Yep.
You've established that through who you were being and how you showed up and what your priorities were. And so that's a beautiful thing, that even if outside circumstances have changed, you also always know deep down that you're someone that can do that. Mm-hmm. That's something that can't be taken away.
Yeah. And it kind of happened by accident too. I don't even some stuff like that has happened. Yeah, it just happens.
He talks about that all the time. It's fate, right? I have 61 highlighted. The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, in that it stands ready for what comes and is not thrown by life unforeseen. So, yeah, you got to basically be ready for, what comes and be prepared. And that's the. I kind of like that.
Yeah. I have number 43, no chorus of lamentation, no hysterics. And I complain all the time, I'm going to be honest. I definitely do that. I try to emulate my grandmother, who was one of the strongest women I ever knew. She was a single mom and raised 2 kids by herself in the 70s, and basically just had to start from the ground up. And then when she was battling cancer, I never once heard her complain one time. And that's insane to me, because she never read this book. She never read any philosophy books, but I never heard her complain one time. And that to me is insane, because I complain 500 times a day about anything. So I feel like that's something that I really... There's things in here that I feel like you can read it and think, oh, he never did that. He's like, I never complained. But he's probably writing this down to remind himself to not complain. And that's something that's if you read this in a way of this is how I am, you almost get discouraged, how can someone feel this way? But now when I think about it, I think he's right. All of these are reminders to himself. So maybe he did catch himself complaining. That's why he wrote that down. Or for what is just and good is on my side. Maybe he wrote that down just so he would remember it in a time of when he was struggling,
That's I would say that's 100% what it is that he's experienced in his own life what the pitfalls of these things are. Either by himself or someone close to him.
Mm-hmm. Maybe here's a good piece of advice and writes it down. I feel like this is this journaling method that he uses. I feel like is the best way to stay on track and know really who you are and what you want out of your life. Because he's just constantly reminding himself of things that he needs to focus on to stay on the path. Because I feel like if he didn't have the journal, the thoughts in his mind and the things that are happening would just overflow. And he's just putting everything on paper. And
gets clarity that way.
Yep.
I have 69 highlighted. Perfection of character is this: to live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense. I don't know what yours says on that one.
Which one's that one?
69.
69. Let's see. I'm pretty sure I probably have that one underlined, being honest.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, I do have it underlined. Look, perfection of character, to live your last day every day without frenzy or sloth or pretense.
Yeah. Yep.
I have one. Let's see. I have one here that kind of goes into how we've been talking about firefighting, is not to worry about being killed or about anything but doing his duty. I feel like that's the number one, or one of the virtues is courage. And I feel like a courageous person doesn't worry about things they're out of their control. They just worry about doing the thing, doing their job. Like Joe doesn't worry about much. He just worries about doing his job, and he's damn good at it. He's always in here doing what he wants to do. He's not worried about anything. Like, he's the most carefree person I've ever met. Like, he could have like 4 flat tires and he'd be like, I can still make it to 10 a.m. It's not that big of a deal. And I feel like with firefighting, that's like the ultimate thing. It's like you're going into something that doesn't care about you, and it might hurt you, but you're still doing your duty. You know, that's very admirable to me, and that's something that I'm looking into, as you know.
Yeah.
And so, I love that one, because I feel like that's something that not many people have. You know, more people are worried about saving themselves than doing what's best for the community. And I feel like if everyone just did what's best for the community, everyone else would just be fine. You know, I like that. I like that a lot. Like that idea of help.
I love it. Book 8 here, and some notes I have about book 8 are it's a life of virtue in harmony with nature and controlling our own behaviors. Man's proper work, I wrote, and the whole needs a beginning and an end. Kind of goes to that death thing and starting and ending.
Yeah, death and nature are very heavy in this book.
Yeah,
they're all in there. I have number 22. Stick to what's in front of you. Idea, action, and utterance. So it's like what I say, what I think, do, and say. Like, those are the only 3 things that I can control. I feel like a lot of people focus on action, but I feel like not enough people focus on like what they say, and what they think. I know I personally, like, I can do everything perfectly, but in my head, I can probably not be thinking everything perfectly. And that's probably the most important thing. Like we were saying, like, if you control your perspective, you control everything else. You can't control your effort without changing your perspective. You have to, like, look at things a certain way. And then 22A, which is like a branch of the last one, says, this is what you deserve. You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow. And so, like, a lot of people don't accept what they deserve, and I feel like that's a good thing or a bad thing. If I have so many great things in my life and I keep doing bad things, it's like I don't accept what I'm deserving of. If there's a whole bunch of bad things in my life that are caused from my action, that, like, I did the wrong thing and I don't accept it, then that's what I deserve. You know, I just need to be able to accept what I deserve is what that one kind of tells me.
Radical responsibility.
Yeah, both of good and bad. Like, be responsible.
Good and bad, 100%.
Yeah, because usually people think about responsibility as a bad thing. Like, if you have if you're responsible for something, usually it's not in a good connotation. Like, usually, like, if they're like, you're responsible for this, it's like you hurt somebody or something bad happened. It's like no one, like, not many people will, like, have something happen and, like, think, oh, I'm responsible. Like, if you win a tournament, like, oh, I'm responsible for this. Like, I didn't think that when I won last weekend. I was just like, oh, I won. And it just kind of is what it is. But, like, if I lost, you're sure as hell not going to know. I'm like, damn, I should have gone to training more. I should have done this. But it's hard to be responsible for the things that you deserve. Yeah. The good things, I should say.
I have 20. I wrote whole, beginning, and end. Nature's aim for everything includes its cessation just as much as its beginning and its duration. Like someone throwing up a ball, how can it be good for the ball on the way up and bad on the way down? Or even when it hits the ground? How can it be good for a bubble when it forms and bad when it bursts? A candle is a similar example. And it's he uses all these analogies and all these stories to illustrate both the paradox of how important the human life is, but also how minuscule and unimportant it is.
It's a hard contradiction. Like, the entire book, like, one second he'll say, like, cherish everything, and then the next one he's like, don't cherish anything. And it's like you have to find that middle range, and if you think too much about it, it gets really confusing. I think that's why he has this journal, just so he can kind of keep it all, like, in line. He's got 2 extremes. If he just keeps, like, saying the 2 extremes, you're definitely going to find something in the middle.
Yeah, and this is actually on 34. I underlined a line about paradox. It says, I'll just read the whole thing. If you have ever seen a severed hand or foot or a head cut off and lying some way away from the rest of the body, analogous is what someone does to himself as far as he can when he will not accept his lot and severs himself from society or does some unsocial act. Suppose you have made yourself an outcast from the unity of nature. You were born a part of it, but now you have cut yourself off. Yet here lies the paradox, that it is open to you to rejoin that unity. No other part has this privilege from God to come together again once it has been separated and cut away. It's just one of those, we're determining if we're going to be a good community member or not a community member, and we can be reunited by just taking our virtues seriously.
Yeah, I feel like knowing your moral compass is definitely like I think that jiu-jitsu teaches that real well too, because, like, you realize, like, if someone does something you don't like it, you're not going to do that. You know who to hang around. you know how to learn the right way. And it's a very, like, there's not many locations where there are people from different social classes that can all, like, be together in, like, one building. Like, you could have a cop over here, you could have an ex-convict over here, you could have a lawyer right here, you could have a McDonald's worker right there, and they could be partners, and everyone kind of figures out that community together. And, like, and there's always, like, 2 or 3 guys, like, no one kind of messes with. And it doesn't matter if they're high class or low class. Like, no one messes with them just because out of, like, just how they are. And I feel like jiu-jitsu has that sense of community where you can almost, like, become a community person through it, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
wanting to help people.
That's one of the beauties of jiu-jitsu, particularly with, like, political stuff and social, economic,
no one cares about
racial.
politics.
It's like literally all that stuff, you leave it outside here.
I like that. That's cool.
I have number 47, and I wrote external you can change, and it's if you distress some external cause, it is not the thing itself that troubles you, but your own judgment of it, and you can erase this immediately. And that goes back to, you're responsible for the story around it.
That same one, I have that highlighted. It says, if the problem is something in your own character, who's stopping you from setting your mind straight? And if it's something you're not doing, you think you should be, why not just do it? And it's just like, if there's something wrong with you, just change it. Yeah, but you have to know if it's something wrong with you or if it's someone else's thinks something is wrong with you. I feel like that's where journaling comes into effect. I can't go like really that long without journaling. I can only go like 4 or 5 days without it because then like my mind starts to get all clogged up. And I feel like this is a good way to think about it. If there's something you want to change, just change it. But you have to know whether it's something you want to change or if it's something someone else wants you to change. And that's a really hard thing to discern, I feel like.
The last one I have highlighted is 51, and this is just part of it. By keeping yourself at all times intent on freedom and staying kind, simple, and decent. It's just like the last line of that. And I just think that's try to keep it simple.
Yep. This book is very simple, but it's also very complex too. Like if you just like look at everything, it says nature, death, and like your perception and your effort. Like that's pretty much it. Number 59 for me is like the last one I have highlighted. It says, people exist for one another. You can instruct or endure them. So it's like everyone has a purpose. Either you help them or you just try to deal with them, And I was telling that to one of my students because he was didn't like getting partnered with this other kid. And I was like, well, you have to be able to either work with him or you have to be able to just to endure being his partner. Because I was telling him, like, whenever I was coming up, you don't have the choice of choosing who you want to go with. Like, as like a is it still going?
Still going.
All right, word. So, as like a white belt, you don't have the authority to really choose who your training partner is. You just kind of have to accept who it is and like just know, like, okay, next training session, I better stand next to the guy that I want to be with. But like, as you get higher and higher in rank, you can just walk up to people and be like, hey, you want to be partners? And like as a kid, I feel like you have to know how that hierarchy works and know that it just takes endurance. You just have to be able to endure it. Because I can't tell you how many times I would come to class and I would be partnered with someone and I'd be like, great, the next 45 minutes of my life are going to be wasted because I'm going to be either helping them too much or they're not going to be giving me the right reaction. I just don't like hanging around them, like stuff like that, or you can instruct them, So I feel like everyone has a purpose and if everyone has a purpose, that means you also have to have one too. So I like it.
I love it. Well, that, my friends, was books 5 through 8 out of Meditations, and we have one more book club meeting, and that is going to be the last chapters of 9 through 12 in 2 weeks. Anything to add there, Tristan? But I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity to keep going through this book. Yep. It's helping me. Yeah, it's helping me. I definitely think it's just a mental embodiment of jiu-jitsu, so hopefully you guys get in class. You can try to practice some of these stoic virtues with us. Well, either the 10 a.m., maybe I won't be at the 6 a.m. because I need sleep, or the 6 p.m. All right, everybody, have a good one. Take care.